This week on Ridiculously Bored.
The bars suck. The people suck. The place sucks. F you, Philly. I hate that dude.
Why?
That dude. I didn't even say good morning. I was like, you're a piece of
There it is.
You're such a
Yeah, you don't remember it because you slept fine that night. I remember it because I twitched myself to sleep.
My name is David Michael.
And I'm Michael Carter.
And we are Ridiculously Bored. All right, Michael, we are here for episode number 12, a very special episode because we have a very special guest. Do you want to introduce him?
Yes. So we reached out to Hot Chocolate and asked him if he'd be willing to be on the episode. So I love this man.
I'm uncomfortable.
So the couple things, just a little background, and then we'll get into some stories. First things first, I think he keeps me sharp. I think he's got just as quick as wit as I do. I also think he's one of the few people who will call me on my bullshit when I say something, because every once in a while I'll say something absolutely crazy and no one else says anything.
Never.
Yeah, way
and
to
he'll just
butter
kind of
him up,
look
Mike.
around and be like, nobody's going to say anything to that? Like, he just said something insane and nobody's going to say anything? And I think this episode, we talk about you and I being mean. I think we're all going to be so defensive that we're going to be mean before the other guy can be. I think that's going to happen a lot this episode.
No.
Yeah. And the other thing is, knowing him as long as we have, I mean, I've known him since 7th grade, right? So what are we then, about 8 or 9? 13 or 14, I mean?
Yeah.
Right? When we go to the 7th grade?
Oh, wow.
So there's nothing that's sacred. But I also need to be careful, and he needs to be careful, and you need to be careful, because there are things we say to ourselves when we're just out that we can't say with other people around. Yes.
Ever again.
Yes.
Ever.
It reminds me of, there's an episode of Arrested Development where Job has a black puppet on his hand, and the puppet's saying all these crazy things, and the puppet says, white America's not ready for this. And Michael's like, I don't think black America's ready for this. So with that, let's get into it.
All
All
right.
right. Hot Chocolate, you want to say hello?
Sure. Hello, everyone. This is insane. Let's keep going. Yay.
All right, I have a question for you, Hot Chocolate. So you and I did not meet until the comic book store. I believe you either worked there or you hung out there.
No, I just lived there because it was either that or go home.
So I used to see you there all the time. So I think that's the
I think
that's
I've
the
given
time
you
that
some of
we
my
met.
money in those poker games that we used to play there. Although, to be fair,
Yeah.
I gave my money to everybody in those poker games. Everybody.
So wait, I want to back up for 1 second. I love that you were there so much that David thought you might have worked there. That's great.
Well, and he sat behind the counter reading comic books. I remember that specifically,
I
which is
did.
why I'm like,
I
he
don't
must work
remember
here.
being
Yeah, he
behind the
did.
counter.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
did.
sometimes like because the old version of the store had like an L desk,
Oh,
an
yeah.
L counter, right? So you could go in that back area that wasn't near where the front where we were helping people. I will say this: he did mention quickly those poker games in the store.
Brutal poker games.
We used to. So the boss was there, comes in the morning, kind of gets things started, and then used to leave. And it was me, GQ used to work there, the artist used to work there for a while. But so the rest of us, we'd be there the rest of the day. And so what we started doing to pass the time is we'd start playing poker in the back corner of the store. On the counter, for cash,
Oh, God.
with customers.
Oh, that's right.
There was, yes. So not just the friends in the back
No.
playing. We used to let customers play. And where we got in trouble, where the boss finally found out, was we took like $100 from a customer over his lunch break. And then he was like, yeah, there's going to be no more poker in the store.
I don't think I knew that story.
Yeah, that's how we ended up getting in trouble.
Yeah. So my question for you is, you just a little bit about your background. So you grew up obviously with Mike. You spent a lot of time. You ultimately ended up where you are today, which I want to let you talk about. But how did you get there? And like, what was that whole, like, what was the transition like?
Oh man, I don't really have a good answer for this. Like, we all grew up in your shell, and then at like the tender age of 18, my parents were like, my dad used to commute into the city for work, and he was like, I'm done. And I was like, okay, I don't know what that means. I'm going to college. And he goes, no, we're all moving to Florida. And I was like, okay. So I spent like 7 years in Florida bumming around doing
I had no
nothing.
clue.
And then I finally got tired of it, and I moved to Boston with literally $200 in my pocket. And I think I borrowed a coat of a buddy of mine who lived in Florida. I'm like, I'm never returning this. He's like, it doesn't fit. I'm like, that's good. And I moved to Florida with no money.
Did you know anybody in Florida at the time?
No. The only person I knew was a guy who we went to school with who ended up showing up there. And I won't say his name, but he ended up going to the same college that I sort of attended. Not really.
Look, you're talking to a high school dropout here. So.
I'm a college dropout, so that works out great. So, but yeah, so I ended up there, and then I moved to Boston to be with this girl and to get the hell away from Florida because it's the armpit of North America. On the East Coast, on the West Coast, that's Sacramento. But yeah,
there goes those viewers.
Yeah, thanks.
So for the record, I actually have no idea what the armpit of North America on the West Coast is. I just remember Sacramento being hilarious. But I ended up in Boston for a few years, and that's where I met my wife. And then we ended up moving out to the Midwest. And it's weird. Yeah, I don't know how I ended up here. Like, I mean, I got married, and it was, my wife keeps reminding me that it was actually my idea to move out here. But we just had our first kid. We had no family in the area. I'm a horrible parent. And I'll just be honest, I did not know
Mike is too, but he won't admit it like that.
Right? Especially babies. I was terrified and scared and all that other nonsense that goes with being a parent.
Yeah, I've pretty much held no kids under 6 months that weren't my own. Other than one time I was talking, I put my hands out in being Italian, doing an expression, and my sister put one of her kids in my hand, and I'm like, take this kid out of my hands. And she's like, why? You seem nervous. I'm like, I am nervous. Take the fucking kid out of my hand. I'm honestly, that I think is one of the only times under 6 months that I've held a kid that wasn't my own.
I don't have a problem holding them, but you remember that first year where your whole job is just to keep them alive and not do something stupid. I was absolutely terrified of that period. And I got like sleep apnea and I'm exhausted. Mess and blah blah. But yeah.
I love how this conversation's revolving around not killing the children in their first year of life, as opposed to raising them.
That's a very different thing than not killing them. Let's be very clear.
We're not trying to make a Lifetime movie here, right? 3 men and a couple dead babies. That's not what we're going for.
Although I think people pay to see that. But yeah, so you were saying
when you moved out west, actually, it was just shortly after I got back from Australia.
Yeah,
because I got back. We were at Big Daddy's kid's baptism, I think it was, one of his second kid.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's what it was. And you were like, hey, how's it going? It's great. I'm leaving.
That's how we do everything, though, right? I don't think we've ever been tender and sensitive.
No.
But yeah, so I ended up out here, and we've been here since 2007. Yeah. That's a long time.
Well, that was a long time.
So let me go into, speaking of tender and sensitive.
Oh, God.
It's going right to the groin.
I love that we're both concerned, David.
Yeah, you should be. And so should Dad. So, as most people who know me know, I do not like being touched by people I don't know. Period. And people are like, what about if it's a super hot fucking girl? I'm like, I don't care. If I don't know you, don't touch me. Right? Like sometimes it's a very big thing with waitresses for some reason. They'll come over and they'll like put their hand on your arm and be like, do you need anything? Would you like anything else? I hate it. If I don't know the person, I hate it. So you were doing a family, you and your dad, male bonding trip. You were going to San Antonio a couple years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And you happened to let us know that you were doing that. And I'm like, well, fuck it. Let's turn this into a guy's trip. So it was to go see a Formula One race, which most of us never have. I know you're into Formula One, but most of the rest of us have never probably even watched one, let alone been to
I
one.
think that's the most
So we're
miserable
like,
I've seen the three of you been in a different city, if I recall correctly.
Yes. So you're like, we're going here. So we're like, oh, we're great. We're going to crash it. So we get to San Antonio.
No, hold on. Who's we? It's me, you,
it's me,
and GQ,
you,
right?
GQ.
Oh, that's right. GQ was there.
And then it's Hot Chocolate and his dad.
Mm-hmm.
And so his dad I hadn't seen now in probably at this point 10 years, maybe I'd say. Right? Probably since your wedding was the last time I saw him before that.
Yeah, probably. I don't think that was 10 years ago, but all right.
His dad is the kind of guy, hey, how you doing? Here's my hand, firm handshake, maybe a pat on the back, keep moving. His dad puts his hand out. I go and hug him. So I get around his hand and I start hugging him. Full on, chest on chest, really as tight as I possibly can. And I know it's uncomfortable for him, so I don't stop.
I do remember this, actually.
Yeah, so I'm just holding, well, because it's your dad's face that makes the whole thing. So I'm just holding on to him. Now I have actually my face on his chest. Like, oh, this is like you would your wife if you were doing a slow dance. So I'm holding on to him. He still has his hand out for a handshake as if, like, what just happened? So his arm's sticking out, almost like Frankenstein. His arm's sticking out.
Oh, yeah.
He looks at me. He looks at Hot Chocolate. He looks at me. He looks at Hot Chocolate, and he's like, "What's going on?" He's like, "Why is he doing this?" And Hot Chocolate's like, he knows it's probably making you uncomfortable. He's like, "Don't worry, it'll pass. He'll let go in a few minutes." And I did that for about another 30 seconds.
Oh my gosh, I do remember that. Oh man, yeah, that was the most.
I think I actually.
Ever been on.
I think I have a picture of that moment. To be honest with you, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty
I'll
sure I do.
I'll pick it up, yeah.
I need to dig it up.
David, if you can, he'll dig it up. We'll throw it in the episode.
Nice.
Yeah.
So we've done a lot of the guy trips, right? And so we've gone to Chicago.
Oh yeah,
we've gone
Chicago.
to DC.
Philly.
We've gone to San Antonio. Philly.
Philly was crazy.
Oh my gosh, Philly.
Oh my god.
We've gone to Vegas a couple times. What do you remember about the Philly trip?
I remember the diner the day after, right? Like the night before we were out of control, right? And we went into this diner. David, were you on the Philly trip?
I did not go on the Philly trip.
No, so Philly was me, you, Boston Matt.
Oh yeah.
We'll call him Boston Matt. GQ and El Guapo.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, so like
El Guapo!
So, David, we end up in, is it like a Denny's or a diner or something the next morning?
Yeah, it was a diner.
Because Mike can't miss his breakfast.
No, he can't.
Right.
And it's 8, and neither have I. But it's like 8 in the morning, and this diner is filled with like families and people who are being nice and sweet and calm, and we are
like the before church crowd,
David, the volume level from our table must have been like on a scale of 1 to 10, 27. Like we were out of control. Like it was like the night ended, but we just kept it going straight through breakfast. And these poor people
I'm relatively
around us,
sure I wasn't sober by that point. Yeah.
No, you had to be. I mean, we were. Now, actually,
Do you remember us pulling out the receipt that was as long as my leg?
Oh, yeah.
And for the 5 of us, it was like $1,100 or something that we had spent in alcohol the night before.
That
Jesus.
was so much fun. God.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that diner scene, like it was something that somebody put in a movie. They'd be like, "Those guys would be thrown out, blah blah, whatever." And I swear to you, I don't even remember if we had a waiter or a waitress. They just kept on being nice to us, no matter like how loud we got or how crazy we got, and we just kept turning it up until we were like, "We gotta get the hell out of here." What do you remember from Philly?
So at that one, I remember that we were there for 2 nights, right?
Mm-hmm.
The first night, we went out on our own, right? The group of us went out. We went out of the hotel, basically, and made a left. And it fucking sucked. The bars sucked. The people sucked. The place sucked. Fuck you, Philly. It was horrible.
And we just lost the Philadelphia fan base.
It was awful.
Sacramento's gone. Philadelphia's gone. Boston's probably gone. Oh, Florida's already gone.
Yeah, we're working our way through the state.
It doesn't matter about Florida. They can always go.
My friend comes out the next night who lived down there, And she's like, no, you can't go out of the hotel and go left. You got to go out of the hotel and go right.
Oh, hey, Wex
And it
was with us too, right? In Philly?
Oh, yeah, Wex was?
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
I hate that dude.
Why?
That dude.
Why? You guys never spoke to one another. It was so ridiculous.
So condescending when he talks. So condescending. It made me feel less smart whenever he talked.
Because you are.
Can we talk about how smart you really are?
Oh, my God.
So she's like, no, you can't go to the left. You got to go to the right. We go out of the hotel to the right. It's the greatest fucking place in the world.
Seriously, Philly's awesome.
And
I would spend every day in Philly.
We're like, what just happened? And we were probably in total 10 blocks away between the two bars we went to, but it was worlds apart.
Not even.
Yeah.
It was hilarious.
So
oh my God.
That's one thing I remember. The other thing I remember, it's all random stuff. The other thing I remember is we were staying at a club quarters, I think it's called. The drinking had already started, and we go to the bathroom. You were in the bathroom in the bar area, and I threw one pack of matches. This is when they still had matches on the counter. I threw one pack of matches at you. I laughed, GQ laughed, and then GQ goes to me, "You're a fucking child. Stop doing that." So you left the bathroom. I have, and again, this is where now I overshare. I don't like peeing at urinals. I actually go into the stalls. For no other reason than possibly I got a really small dick. No, I like to be able to use toilet paper.
We made it 7 minutes before you mentioned your penis.
Yeah, the balls will be in a couple.
Yeah, they are.
So I go into the stall. Now again, mind you, GQ had just yelled at me for throwing one book of matches at you. He threw all of them at me. So he threw those over the top, and he threw them all over me. So I remember that. And then in our hotel room, do you remember the phone in the hotel room? Do you remember why I thought it was amazing?
Is it the cable was like the entire length of the room or whatever?
No. It was wireless, and the room was about as big as you could stick your arms out and hit both sides of the room. That's how big the room was. And they had a wireless phone as if you were going to go somewhere with it in the room.
I gotta be honest, I don't remember too much of Philly. I do remember that GQ stabbed you in the eye like he was pushing an elevator button. It's the only time I actually saw you go from like happy to like, I'm gonna kill him, to like, no, I can't do that. And then right back to happy. But it was one of those things where you were like, did he just stab him in the eye with his finger? It was hilarious.
Yes. And then he responded. So I had my contacts in.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, my eyes are getting really dry. They're bothering me. When we go back to the hotel, I want to get my glasses. So GQ goes, really? How much are they bothering you? Bam, pokes me right in the eye. Which
to be honest,
followed with.
That sounds like something you would do.
Yeah. But then he followed with, because of all these drinks, I've lost my sense of depth perception. he's like, I didn't actually mean to poke you in the eye. He's like, I just meant to get close. So, yeah. So that was Philly.
Oh, yeah.
All right, hold on. Before we go to a different city, can we talk about Hot Chocolate's fear of flying?
I have a completely rational fear of flying.
There is nothing rational about that.
Absolutely there is. The problem is that I'm not flying the airplane. If I
So
were
you're a
flying the
control
airplane,
freak.
I'd be fine. But if I have no control over the whole thing, and for the record, I actually take a lot of drugs to fly now. I take a lot of Valium. I shouldn't, but I take a lot of Valium to the point where sometimes when I take the Valium, if it's like in a weird part of the day, when I get off the plane, I am as absolutely sarcastic as everything else, but I don't have any facial expression at all. I'm like, yep, that goes. Sure. Like I never.
My favorite
like,
had to be when you went to Vegas and you showed up at like noon.
Oh, yeah.
And I showed up at like noon 30, maybe 1, and everybody wasn't. Yeah, everybody wasn't getting there until
Not
like
a time.
6 p.m. Oh, noon 30 is totally a time. Ask anybody that talks to me. Yeah. So you and you were still high off of whatever narcotics you had taken to get through the flight,
Completely
and we
legal
went
prescription
to.
drugs. Thank you.
Yeah, we went to Caesar's Palace, hit the first bar right inside the door.
Yeah.
And drank for 6 hours.
Oh, God.
Till we got there.
Until you guys got
Was
there.
that 6 hours?
It was like 6 hours,
man.
and 4 at least 6, but sometime between 4 and 6. And when Mike and GQ finally got there, we were absolutely obliterated.
Oh, yeah. I want to say we were smoking cigars before they got there.
Yeah,
right?
we were too. Yeah, we did a little bit of everything.
Oh
You guys
man.
had the whole trip before we showed up. You were like, we're done here.
But that's the only way I can do Vegas without like losing money before you guys get there. Because you guys are flying across the country,
yeah, you
I
always
always
get
end
there
up there before everybody else.
Yeah.
So I usually end up gambling. I'm down 500 by the time you guys even walk in the door.
And you're bitter about it too. When we see
Yes.
you when that happens, you're like, and we're like, okay, it's gonna take a little
Because
while.
we're like, are you gonna bet? Are you gonna bet like a man? I'm already down $1,000 before you guys even got here.
That has happened more than once.
So when we have taken flights together, Hot Chocolate gets very twitchy when he has that medicine.
man.
So the rest of us kind of enjoy watching
It's
that
not good.
play out.
It's not good.
Uh,
I've
Yeah.
gotten better though. I have definitely gotten better over the years. I don't know why I've gotten better.
Do you still take medicine though
Oh
if you
God,
fly?
yes. Why? What are you crazy? Of course I do. In fact,
I
my
also
wife
enjoy-
won't fly with me unless I have medicine. She's like, we're never doing that again. I can't remember what trip we were doing. I think we were flying to Florida or something. And when we got off the plane, she's like, call whoever you have to and get the medicine for the flight home. And I'm like, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah. And she was like, or you have to drive home yourself.
God.
I also like that you said you'd feel better if you were flying the plane. I'm relatively sure the rest of the passengers wouldn't.
No, not even remotely. We would be going very fast.
All right. So that was Philly. We're going to get more into Vegas. We're definitely not done with Vegas yet.
yeah.
So let's talk about the trip where we drove down to Washington, D.C.
We were never supposed to speak of this trip ever again.
There's pieces that I know you want me to
There
leave
will
out that I will
definitely be
leave out.
pieces that we have to leave out.
Right. So we meet at my parents' house, actually. You and Boston Matt drove down.
Okay.
Me, GQ, and El Guapo,
Oh, yeah.
you two all got in a car and we drove down to Washington.
Whose car did we go down in?
I think it was yours. I think it was your red Camry, actually.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So we drive down there. We start hitting all the different places and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Boston Matt had an ex-girlfriend who lived there, so she came out and met up with us for a little, so she hung out with us. So one of the few stories I remember, she had a tattoo. I don't know if you remember this. And it was,
I don't remember much.
yeah, it was a little heart. It was in a private area. It was covered by her underwear, but she had a little heart tattoo. And she was telling us that she had a tattoo, but she wouldn't tell us where, and she wouldn't let anybody see it. So
These all seem
everybody now,
reasonable.
that's right. Now, that's all anybody wants is they want to know where it is, what it is, and if we can,
I don't think
sure,
I
why
was
not see
there
it?
for that. I think I just kept on walking around the bar while you guys were talking to her for a bit.
Possibly because I know you had asked, I know GQ had asked, and then at some point and this is where the alcohol had started kicking in. I was like, "Fuck you! If you don't want to show us, don't show us. We don't need to fucking see it." And then she was like, "Well, since you don't really care about it, now I'm going to show you." And so she like brought me over to the side and showed me, and I was like, what did I just do? How do I do this again? Because I don't know what I just did that she would like it worked
I
out. For
definitely
me.
wasn't there for any of that.
Yeah, possibly not.
And now people that are listening know why we always talk about going out with Mike. We always think we're going to end up in a fight.
Every single time.
So Hot Chocolate has a saying that when we're at a bar and I'm talking in general, he has to be ready that the next person's going to laugh as well as be ready that other person's going to take a swing at it. Yeah. And so there was one time something happened, and I don't remember what it was, but Hot Chocolate was with his drink in his hand. He was standing next to me. Something happened with the guy. I said a comment to him. Hot Chocolate just turned and put down his drink, and then this turned back and waited. And then the guy was like, "Oh, yeah, that's funny." And then he was like, "Oh, okay." And he went back and grabbed his drink and then just started drinking again.
I think David,
Always
we
gotta be
both
ready.
know that is a rational response.
Yes.
Always got to be ready.
So speaking of being ready, Dave, after your dad fell on the knife and cut himself, Hot Chocolate, I showed him the picture, and he was like, "I'll be out there in a couple hours. You tell me who we have to bury." Because he didn't know what happened. He just saw what I call the murder scene photo.
That is still the creepiest thing I've ever seen. Like, it looks literally like someone took a bucket of blood and just trailed it through your dad's
Yeah.
place. I was
By
like,
that,
what?
by the time we took the picture, it had already coagulated, so it was this thick, sloppy mess. And then the smell was indescribable. I mean, just the thought of it makes me want to gag, but it was, I've never smelled death before, and that was probably pretty close.
Wow.
I thought you said the smell of my ass felt like death too.
We've all said that.
Like I said, I've never smelled death before, but it was probably pretty
We've all
close.
said that. Well,
So the weird thing about, again, thankfully I haven't been around a lot of dried blood, especially at that quantity that was there. It was really weird to me the way it wiped off the floor. Like I don't know how to describe it. Like we went with the broom, and it had congealed so much and dried so much that
It came
was
right
like
off. Yeah.
super easy to wipe off. So it was weird to me. Like I wouldn't have expected.
so you didn't have to do
especially
the
from all
thing with the Coca-Cola. That's
No.
probably not a good idea that I know that. But yes.
Yeah, we did have to throw some bleach on it afterwards.
Oh,
Yes.
all right.
Yeah, so thankfully there's no DNA left.
Well, I did tap my dick all over his
Oh
phone.
my God! Seriously?
All right, my favorite meme from the post-election, all the crap going on, is a picture of Donald Trump, and it says Trump spends the last 3 days in the White House rubbing his dick all over everything.
Oh, that's horrible.
So, Hot Chocolate, where did Boston Matt's parents live? Were they in Washington?
So they lived in D.C., like right outside of, I think, maybe the Virginia side, maybe?
Gotcha.
I don't actually know if they're actually outside D.C., but they've been there forever.
Okay. So when we were down in D.C.,
You're really
we
going to tell
went
this
to
part
their
of the
house.
story.
Yes,
Oh,
and this
you're
part I'm going to tell.
horrible person.
You're
No, you really
Tell
are.
it.
I just want to be very clear, everyone. Terrible
so
human being.
So we
They
go
already
to
know
his
that.
parents' house, and his parents are an older couple. Like, even at the time, they were an older couple. Like, look, my parents are 30-ish years older than me. I'm guessing, and I don't know this, Matt's parents might be 45 or 50 years older than him. They just felt a lot older then.
Yeah, but
And
wasn't
so
it spooky how much Matt looked like his dad? Like,
Yes.
not a little bit
Yes.
like his dad. Like, you were like, oh, that is an actual progression to what Matt is going to look like at that age. Like, it was spooky, man.
It was one of those that if, like, you had a slide ruler on the bottom and you slid it, you'd be like, old Matt, young Matt, old Matt, young Matt,
man.
old Matt, young Matt. So we go to his
Oh,
parents' place, and we're all sitting around the table
I would
for
like to
breakfast.
protest this story one more time.
It doesn't matter, David. You have to protest or pay David. He controls everything because he's the editor. So you can settle up afterwards if you want, and
Yeah.
nobody will ever hear this.
I'll send you my price list.
I knew it.
So we were sitting around the table, and you know how, like I always say, even with my parents, there's a certain unintended racism that happens. Right? Like the
it
way
was
they
not
say certain
unintended.
things.
It was absolutely done in humor, but it was not unintended. It was hilarious. Like, to the point where everyone... Anyway, I'll let you keep going. It was fantastic.
Yeah. GQ didn't know what to say. And he's like the rest of us. He always has something to say. So we're sitting around the table, and they're like, "Who wants waffles? Anybody wants waffles? I'll make some fresh waffles." So his father goes and gets the waffle machine,
I already know
brings
where
it
this
out
is
to
going.
the table, and happens to put it right
Terrible
next to
story.
hot chocolate. So the mother says, "Don't put it next to him. You know his people will sue if they get hurt."
I forgot about that one. I thought you were going to do the other one.
No, I don't remember the other one. So you got to tell
You
me
don't
the other
remember
one.
the other one?
No, you got to tell me.
Oh my gosh. So he's reaching over for a waffle. She says what Mike just said, and then stops. And I was just like, that just happened. Okay, great. The next thing that she said was, after we had breakfast, we were all in the room, and I think I'd just been laid off and I was just taking a trip or whatever. And out of nowhere she goes, so you're gonna live off the dole or some nonsense like that. It was basically like, you're gonna collect unemployment. And I was like, what is happening here? So here's the sweetest part of the story. I think it's either Matt's wedding. No, it's Matt's wedding. Boston Matt's wedding. We go, I see the parents. We're at his place. Do you remember when he used to have that roof deck or whatever?
Yes,
so we're
that was
up there.
awesome.
Yeah, I love that place. So we went up there. My wife is up there with her. And the very first thing Matt's mom says to my wife is, "I never said anything like this." And I started howling because the person who tells the story best is Matt. He's like, she said this, she said this. I'm like, stop. It was hilarious. But yeah, it was one of those things where I was like, wow. Man, that was a great trip.
I love Matt. Matt is very monotone, right? So
everything he says is funny.
He could say the funniest thing in the world, and it's very, yesterday I did this, and it's awesome.
So we're in Vegas one time. I have to say this, I'm so sorry, but we're in Vegas one time, and I don't know why, but we were all in the room.
Because you all got beat early. That's like, you had the David syndrome. You all lost early.
I don't even think I was gambling that time. We were just in the room. I think even Big Sexy was there. And for some odd reason, you walk in and out of nowhere, I think we're just all watching TV, and Matt screams, "Get off me!" And we couldn't breathe. I was like, "What the?" Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I love Matt. Sorry. Go on.
So Matt was mad at you in DC. I'll leave the reason why out of it. No, I'm going to be very fair. I'll leave it out of the story. But Matt was very mad at you, and you had disappeared for a few hours.
I don't recall any of this.
So do you remember this? The next morning,
I wasn't even there, and I know this story.
You knock on the hotel door, because you didn't have a key. So the part that GQ and El Guapo started laughing at was I didn't even say good morning. I was like, "You're a piece of shit."
And I think my entire response was, "Nothing happened. Fuck you." And we walked in, and then we drove home. It was great.
Yeah. So actually drove Matt's ex home. Right, that was it. He drove her home, but we were like, I can't believe you drove her home. Like, what are you doing? So, and Matt was still with us. So he drove her home, and then it so happens
this all has to be edited out.
Then the funny thing is, she's like, "Oh, I live a couple miles away." It was like 30. So
it was another state.
He was gone. Yeah.
Like by the time I got, I'm like, "Where the hell?" It was bad.
Yeah. So that's DC in a nutshell. That's not a good trip. So Boston and New York, right, in Pelham, where I was living at the time. We used to go back and forth a lot. Oh, yeah. Like I would say there was a time where in nicer weather, I'd say 3 out of 4 weekends, either me and El Guapo were in Boston or Hot Chocolate was down here. Was down in Pelham. So we used to do that a lot. So that was a lot of fun.
Oh, man.
And then we get all the guys together. So one time, and I don't remember if it was at Pelham or if it was on one of our trips. Now, we're all the same age. Cool.
Except for me.
Hot Chocolate, Big Daddy, Smurf, Chicken Fucker, and El Guapo's actually a year or two younger as well. We're all relatively the same age.
If you want to know about Chicken Fucker, you can watch the last episode 11.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. I just need to. Oh, yeah. That's funny. I just realized that. That makes sense.
So we go to a bar, and all of us don't get ID'd as we're walking in, which is fine, right? We were like 30 at the time, right? So like, go ahead.
This wasn't
Hot Chocolate walks up. Yeah, I don't remember where it was. Hot Chocolate walks up, and the guy's like, "I need to see ID." So the guy who happened to be asking him was black, and Hot Chocolate is black, and so I say, "Well, wait a minute. You just asked the 5 of us. You just let the 5 of us walk in." And why is he going in? And he goes, "Come on, man, you know black don't crack." So I'm like, do we look like old white wrinkly guys here? And Hot Chocolate's like, time to go into the bar.
I think that might have been Philly.
Maybe. Oh, it might have been the first night in Philly. You might be right.
Yeah, it might have been Philly.
You might be right.
That was bad. There were a lot of those.
Yes. David, do you want to talk about anything else in Vegas before I go on, or I want to go on another one?
I don't have a whole lot of Hot Chocolate stories in Vegas that are appropriate for our audience.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much.
So I think I'm gonna
let's just go ahead and skip over that story.
I'm gonna take my Fifth Amendment rights on that.
I will take
question.
the Fifth as well with you, David. Thank you very much. Let's move on.
Why don't I take the Fifth as well, and we'll just stare at each other. Great fucking podcasting. All right, so I'm gonna tell a story. So I love making my parents uncomfortable, and neither of them find me funny. And I'm not saying they don't find me as funny as I think I am. They do not find me funny. So Hot Chocolate is over, And I'm like, hey, I'm going to my parents. It was Saturday or Sunday. I'm like, hey, I'm going to go to my parents, going to have some breakfast there. Do you want to come with me? So he's like, sure, why not? And because El Guapo used to come over all the time as well, because he was my roommate. So Hot Chocolate's like, yeah, sure, I'll come over. So we go over. And I don't know if you remember the story. You'll remember when I say it, but I don't know if you remember beforehand. So we sit around the table, and I'm like, Mom, I'd like to apologize, because I know you told me yesterday you didn't want any black people in the house.
Oh my God.
And so Hot Chocolate is eating like whatever, pancakes or something. He looks up and is like, holy shit. And my mom now, full panic mode. She's like, I didn't say that. Why would you say I said that? And I'm looking at and I'm like, she said it. But now that you're here, she's trying to say she didn't say it. And she's like, I promise you I did not say that. And so Hot Chocolate's like, look, Michael's mom, I know you didn't say it. I know how he is. For the next 10 minutes, though, she won't stop saying, I didn't say that yesterday. I have no problem with any of his friends who want to come over. I don't know why he would say that. I loved it. It was such a great, like, stirring the pot moment. I loved it.
Oh, you're such an asshole.
There it is.
Yes.
There it is.
You're such an asshole.
So
I do have some questions for Mr. Chocolate.
Well, thank you.
What do you do for a living? I actually don't know the answer to this question.
What do you mean? So for a long time, I did IT work. I did financial systems kind of testing and integration. And then about 4 years ago now, I decided that it was decided for me that I would no longer be doing that. And I was about to buy a restaurant. So that worked out. Like the timing of that was perfect. And no disrespect to the guy that I was going in the restaurant business in, but like we gotten down to like literally being 7 days away from signing the lease. And I realized I was like, this is never going to work. We do not communicate well at all. Like it was just not a good idea. So then after that, a buddy of mine was like, hey, do you feel like becoming a landlord and like renting stuff? And I was like, oh, I love real estate. Let's talk about it. And then out of nowhere, I'm a landlord. I have a couple of properties, and I'm trying to get a group of guys together. There's a whole thing in Minneapolis where single families, duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes are all the same zoning because we need housing, like almost every city in the United States. So I got a group of guys together, and we're trying to do that. And it's pretty slow going, trying to get that stuff.
So are you buying the land and then building, or are you buying existing?
No. So I bought a bunch of properties to rent, and then now we're trying to buy, I'll be honest, not the best looking single family homes and turning them into triplexes to increase density. So
first thing he's going to do when he buys them is he turns off the heat
and make sure no one's living there. There's none of that.
Pretty sure he said landlord.
I spent too much time in New York, man. I know all about slumlord stuff. But so that's what I've been basically trying to do. And you got
to use the monopoly method. You buy 3 houses and then you buy a hotel with the profits from the 3 houses. It's been interesting. It's been hard. But I don't think I hear commercial real estate is really hot right now. Ridiculously bad advice from David and Michael.
I keep wondering when someone's going to bite the bullet and turn one of those things into like a bunch of condos and just, start that whole nightmare going. But we'll see.
Well, what they're doing, at least in Arizona, is you're seeing a lot of where they can get away with it. You're seeing a lot of commercial buildings or industrial buildings being turned into nightclubs. So after hours.
Legal nightclubs?
Legal. No, totally legal. After hours, they don't have to sell alcohol, and you can be 18 to get in. So you see a lot of freshmen, sophomore, especially in a college town like Tempe, It's pretty popular.
So if anybody's having trouble getting COVID where they live, David knows a few nightclubs that are open after hours.
I've already told you, COVID doesn't really exist in Arizona. I mean, you go out, other than the masks, people are pretty much doing what they normally
you should
do.
Look at the numbers. The numbers would say otherwise.
But nobody cares. That's the stupid thing.
Out there, and he just got the vaccine. I think maybe his first shot. I don't know if he's gotten a second one yet.
Mm-hmm.
And, he didn't come back for Christmas. I'm pretty sure he left just before Thanksgiving. It's been rough. He's a pretty close guy. We just haven't had a chance to see him. So
yeah.
My mom, because she's in the nursing home, it was one of the first ones to get it. She just got her second shot the other day.
Nice.
So she's now fully vaccinated as much as you can be in the environment we're in.
Sure.
So yeah.
Still creepy.
Yeah. So I was lucky enough to fly to New York, or unlucky enough to fly to New York in the middle of the pandemic and drive back from New York to Phoenix. So I experienced what every state between New York and Arizona, I experienced all of the different levels of COVIDness. And being in New York was like being in some sort of like 1984 dystopian like society where everything is locked down. And then it's slowly, as you go state by state towards the West Coast, things just open up more and more and more. And then you get into Arizona and you're like, hey, what's COVID?
Wow.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. So again, if you're having trouble getting COVID, please go see David in Arizona at the After Hours clubs. Ridiculously bad advice from Michael and David.
I actually just got tested yesterday because my brother-in-law came over my house last weekend for the UFC fights, and says he was kind of under the weather, but ended up getting tested 2 days later, and he ended up getting COVID. So we had to all go get tested. So we tested negative.
How did he get it? It doesn't exist in Arizona.
Really? We're doing this still?
Yeah.
All right. So the other thing, which neither of you were there for, but it's worth mentioning because you kind of know the players. Big Daddy's kid had her 16th, what's it called? Sweet 16, about a year and a half ago.
How's that possible?
And I know you're not supposed to make fun of people, but I can't help with this story because it was fucking so shocking to me. So,
and you're a terrible person.
Big Daddy's wife, her maid of honor, was there, right? So the maid of honor in the wedding party. I was the best man. The maid of honor was there. At the Sweet 16, and we didn't know this beforehand, so right now it's me, Chicken Fucker, and Big Daddy standing next to each other. She comes in, and the person I knew with 2 legs now had 1 leg. So she had some medical issues, and she lost one of her legs. But I say to him later, I'm like, how do you not warn somebody? That somebody I've known basically 20 years is going to come in with only 1 leg. I'm like, how do you fucking not warn somebody? And he's like, I kind of forgot. Maybe I should have said it.
I think when you play this back, you will see that I actually start laughing before you say what you say, because I know what horrible thing is going to come out of your mouth.
Look, I know I'm a bad person for first thinking about me.
You are.
In this case. But I'm like, just a slight warning. By the way, later on, there'll be 3 of us hanging around. Normally there's 6 legs. There's only going to be 5. Like, just something.
Terrible.
It's insane.
You are a bad person.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
So Vegas. So I know we're not going to talk a lot about Vegas. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. But
I don't think anything's happened.
Nah, not really. Good.
And nothing stayed in Vegas.
That's right. So we go to church at 10. I'm pretty sure.
I don't even know.
Feed the homeless at 11. Strippers, drugs, and gambling.
No, honey, none of the above. None of the above.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I didn't go to church. So the story I want to tell is a simple one, and it's so Hot Chocolate doesn't come every year when we go there, right? So he might come.
I don't get
first
the
year,
invite
fourth
every
year.
year.
Oh, that's
no, you
bullshit.
definitely get the
That's
invite. Everybody
bullshit.
gets the invite.
Calling you out on that.
You're not involved in the planning every year, but you get the invite.
All right, maybe.
So one of the years he comes out there, and this is what's great about being friends for so long.
Oh God,
One, he's always there to help you whenever you need help.
Dear Lord.
But he's also there to be like, I told you. So we're at the table. We're gambling. The dealer happens to be a black guy, and I got a shitty hand.
Jesus.
And I'm like, yeah, you'll remember when I say it. I'm like, I had a bad hand. I'm like, boy, you got to be kidding me, man. And he's like, you call me boy? And so the guy says to me, like, now you're supposed to be nice. You're the dealer. He's like, man, how fuck you up? You don't call me boy. And so I'm like, well, I wasn't calling you boy. Like I was just saying it as part of the sentence. So Hot Chocolate leans over and goes to the dealer. I told him not to call a black man boy before. He's like, I don't know why he did that. So now all of a sudden I've become my mom. I'm like, I didn't say that. I was like, I wasn't directing it at you. I was like, I was like, oh shit. It was like me saying, oh shit. Oh man. Yeah.
Oh my God, that's terrible.
Yeah, you don't remember it because you slept fine that night. I remember it because I twitched myself to sleep.
I remember having the conversation at some point, probably before that happens. And I also remember going, why? Why is it offensive? I don't understand. But yeah, you explain it to me and I get it. So,
yeah.
But being the ignorant white person, I had no clue.
Yes.
Oh, man.
All right. Dave, should we move on to the one crazy question? We'll have Hot Chocolate join us this week.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
What is the one?
The one crazy question for the week is, what is the funniest joke that you can remember?
Now hold on, Hot Chocolate. Now I gotta do my version of David. Why is that crazy? What's so crazy about that? It's just a joke. What's your answer to that?
You do realize I'm going to edit out that whole 3 seconds, right?
I'll just keep saying it. What's so crazy about it? What's just a joke? Eventually, you're gonna have to give up. You're gonna be like, "Fuck it, I gotta leave it in."
Well, if you tell a funny joke, maybe it will be crazy.
Oh wow!
But we all know you're not funny.
Cut out what I say. All right, you can go first, David. It's your question this week.
Oh, so I got to go first last week, and it was my question too.
All right, well, why don't we let our guest go then?
So I'm gonna set this up a little bit. So there's this old vaudeville joke called The Aristocrats.
Oh Jesus,
And
we don't have time.
I'm not going to tell that joke, but it's the documentary around it is hilarious because all the comedians tell the joke over and over again, and I don't know why, but I laugh at every single telling of the Aristocrat joke. It's absolutely hysterical. But at the end, they do like these little snippets of all the comics who are telling the joke and stuff. And Robin Williams does this one joke, and I'm going to butcher it, but I got to tell you, I love this freaking joke.
Well, the good thing is he's not around to be mad at you.
This is why people don't like you. But,
I apologize to Robin Williams' family.
But so Robin Williams is standing around, and the joke goes exactly, I think it goes like this. A rabbi walks into a bar with a frog on his head, and the bartender says, "Where'd you find one of those?" And the frog goes, "In Brooklyn. They got 1 million of them." I don't know why, but after hearing the Aristocrat joke for like an hour, I could not stop laughing. It's my favorite freaking joke, and it's just so. And Robin Williams just delivers it perfectly, and I just could not stop laughing. I'm sorry, that's my joke. That's the one I like.
So I have to give a little bit of background on the Aristocrat joke because it is.
We don't ever need to
if you are
background. No, move on.
Oh yes, we do.
You're a horrible person.
We do. If you're a comedian, all comedians know this joke because it's kind of like a rite of passage. But the Aristocrat, if there's a documentary on it, the joke is essentially you try and make the most absolutely disgusting, most perverse, most like just absolutely gut wrenching story, and the punchline is. Do you remember the punchline?
Yeah, the punchline is, what do you call it? The Aristocrats. It's hilarious.
And it has nothing to do with the story.
Not even remotely. So the best part about the joke is, as they're doing the documentary, guys really do tell it different from girls. Like, that part is actually amazing to me. Like, the guys tell the joke one way, and the women tell the joke a completely different way. And don't get me wrong, they're both hysterical, but I'm like, oh, wow, that is, like, weird watching brains work. It was kind of cool.
Yeah. For sure.
Well, I've never seen this.
Are you serious?
Documentary. Yeah.
Oh, Jesus.
Because I guess I'm probably too busy watching the cheese rolling one on Netflix, so I've never seen this one. But is it the exact? Yes, you should listen to an old episode. There's a We Are the Champions, or We Are Champions, it's called on Netflix.
I think it was episode 2.
It is just such a weird show.
All right.
So is it the exact same joke word for word
No,
that they say?
no,
Or is
no.
it the same style joke? It's the same punchline.
It's the same framework of a joke. And the framework is a guy walks into an agent's office and is pitching him on a play, a Broadway play. And then so the agent's like, okay, tell me about it. So what happens between that line and the punchline is completely up to whoever tells it.
And every time they take a turn, you're just like, oh, that's worse than the last time. And it's amazing.
And it's always been like this Hollywood insider, like all the comedians that have ever done any sort of stand-up, they know this joke, but not everybody, like, you know, normal people like you and I know it. So right after...
Whoa. What do you mean, like us? I have a joke vault, buddy.
Yeah, and it's really funny.
Maybe it's in there.
No, you don't. That's not a vault of jokes.
It's not a thing.
The podcast.
Yeah, and that one's not in it either.
Yeah. So here's the setup.
Hot chocolate has to go now. Thank you for... Cut him off, David. Cut him off.
So the setup for this documentary, though, is right after 9/11, they're doing a roast of somebody. And I don't remember who, but Gilbert Gottfried gets up and he makes a 9/11 joke. And
that's what cost them the Aflac commercials, right?
It goes over like a lead balloon. Everybody's like, boo, too soon, whatever. Like, and like people start throwing stuff, like it's bad, right? So after about a minute of him just taking this abuse and silence, he goes in to the aristocrat. And by the end of that joke, he had turned the entire audience around, and everybody in the audience, which is all made up of his peers, like Hollywood actors and actresses and comedians, and they're all just rolling on the floor laughing. So that was kind of the premise of the documentary was, you know, that joke, but you know, how it was told. Forever. Oh yeah.
Since vaudeville or some nonsense like that.
And you know, you're talking about Gilbert Gottfried saying the 9/11 joke's too early, right? Like, Mel Brooks always said comedy is tragedy plus time.
Yeah.
But there's always that fine line between when can you start joking about something and when shouldn't you? And so he got burned by, like I said, he lost his Aflac contract from that. That was the last time he ever did one of their commercials.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So what are your jokes, gentlemen?
Michael?
All right. I have 2.
That is surprising.
And they're both kind of those one-liner type jokes. They're not much longer. So one is, I guess probably categorized as a dad joke. What is it called when Batman skips church? Christian Bale. And this one of my friends told me, and I just love this line. What is the difference between jelly and jam?
Oh, this is a terrible joke.
I love this. What is the difference between it's like a knock-knock joke. I say knock-knock, you say who's there. I need somebody to say, what is the difference between jelly and jam?
What is the difference,
jelly
Michael? And jam? I'm so sorry, world.
You can't jelly your dick down a girl's throat.
Oh, you are a horrible person.
I love that joke. I love it.
Please, for the love of God, cut that out.
I might have to leave it in. This is
proving we're all terrible people.
We can't talk about the aristocrats and then like cut that one out.
Oh man.
Here's the problem too. You're trying to between the three of us, we're all of our own, like if I have the devil on this shoulder and the devil on this sholdder, it's one's you, one's is David. So it's hot chocolate on this side, David on this side. All right, what's yours, David?
All right, so I'm horrible at remembering jokes, but there's one joke that I always remember. So if you've heard this before, shut up and don't ruin the punchline. But my grandfather told me this joke, and my grandfather, who passed away about 10, 15 years ago, was a really amazing storyteller, and his jokes were always long. So this one's a little bit long. So there's a boy, and he's sitting with his grandfather, and his grandfather has a drink of alcohol, and the boy says to his grandfather, he says, "Gramps, can I have some of that?" And the grandfather says, "Well, no, you're not old enough." And he's like, "Well, what do you mean I'm not old enough?" He says, "Well, can your penis touch your butthole?" And the kid's like, "Well, no." He's like, "When your penis can touch your butthole, then you can have a sip of my drink." Kid goes, "All right." He walks away. Next day, he comes back. He sees Grandpa. Grandpa's smoking a cigarette. "Hey, Grandpa, can I try that cigarette?" He goes, sorry, little guy. He goes, can your penis touch your butthole? He's like, no, you can't. You can't do it. You can't do it, man. Come back when your penis can touch your butthole, and then, I'll let you smoke a cigarette. Next day, Grandfather walks up to the kid, and the kid's eating some ice cream, and he says, hey, Grandpa would love a lick of that ice cream. Can I have some of that ice cream? And the kid goes to his grandfather. He says, well, can your penis touch your butthole? Grandpa says, well, yes, it can. He said, go fuck yourself.
So David's grandfather, who I knew, telling that story, I have a feeling of that's what, if The Giving Tree was wrote by David's grandfather, that's what that would be. Oh, shit. Awesome. All right, so this week for the joke vault, as Hot Chocolate pointed out, and you point out every week, they're not really jokes. I actually stumbled across something else.
Something funny?
Well, you can be the judge. It's actually when Hot Chocolate was moving. So, all right, so I got to back up. So before we had like our cell phones like we do now, where you could set up an iMessage chat or a link or a WhatsApp chat, and you could say all these different things to each other. Every Monday, all the boys would send around an email. Oh, yeah. So, Cool, Big Daddy, Chicken Fucker, Smurf, El Guapo, and Hot Chocolate and
that nickname.
would send around this chat. And so on Monday was what we did on the weekend, how were things, and then slowly but surely everybody was responding to it back and forth. Then as the week went on, then it became, the story started kind of drying up, and then it became, hey, how's your sister? How's your mother? Like those kind of things. Friday would come, the story would be done, we'd go away. Monday morning, we'd start again, same thing, same type story. Well, how was your weekend? And we'd go about it. So this wasn't the point of this, but I'm going to tell one story. So at one point, Chicken Fucker accidentally puts the wrong name in the chat. So instead of...
I'm sorry.
You know this story. So instead of our friend Cool, he picked somebody who I'll call Cool A in his work.
Oh, man.
On this chat. And so Monday comes, and the messages are all, the emails are all pretty rough. It's as offensive as you can imagine, as dirty as you can imagine, as derogatory as you can imagine. And we're going back and forth for a couple days. Then on, I'd say, Wednesday, Smurf goes, hey, just curious, who's Cool A?
It wasn't Smurf. And it was me.
Oh, Hot Chocolate says, I'm just curious, who's Cool A? And Chicken Fucker's like, holy shit, that's one of my coworkers. So now, as you know, it's the game of numbers here. First email goes out, 5 or 6 of us respond to it. So now there's 5 versions of this email. That comes out, all of us start responding to it. Now there's 15, 20 versions of the email. So at one point, there's in essence potentially 30 different emails that are out there. Oh. That one of them is my line, one of his Hot Chocolate lines, that kind of thing. So we keep going, and Chicken Fucker's now in a panic and keeps just saying, stop responding to these. But people are playing catch up still. So like they haven't gotten to the email that says, hey, that's not the right person. So a few weeks later, we're like, did this Cool A ever say anything to you? And he's like, no, never fucking mentioned like stop sending me emails or what's wrong with you people or I've been getting your. So his coworker never said anything. So he's like, I'm not bringing it up.
Oh man.
So sorry. The point of my story here was when we were doing this and Hot Chocolate told us he was. Big Daddy decided to write a poem. Big Daddy's a big writer.
Yes.
So he wrote a poem about him moving out west. So I'm going to read that poem. I've edited a little bit because, as I mentioned in our emails, there's certain things you can't say anymore.
Let's keep this part along.
Yes, and I can't say in on the internet and probably keep my job.
Did you get his express written consent before you're using his poem on national internet television?
I asked that other wrong guy in the email. He said totally fine.
Oh, that was a bad week too. We were horrible to that guy. Anyway,
this is something also that I bet Big Daddy probably doesn't even remember he sent it around because the volume of shit we sent around.
Man.
I just happened to stumble across this. I actually was looking for one of the Washington D.C. emails because I had summarized it at one point, like as a hey, here's a wrap up. So I thought I still had that. I couldn't find it, but I stumbled across this instead. So, all right. So this is Big Daddy's Ode to Hot Chocolate movie in replacement of the joke vault. I don't like him. I thought him rude. But Mike and Cool said you must hang with this dude. He's into comics, women and booze, steaks and cigars. How can you lose? He was angry and bitter, but I understood. A bit too loud, but his stories were damn good. Drinking and stories that we can't discuss. It was immediately apparent he was one of us. A circle of friends, unlike all others. 3 honkies, El Guapo, and 2 really cool brothers. It didn't say honkies. It didn't say El Guapo. It didn't say brothers.
No, it didn't.
That's an intentional edit
Just
there.
keep moving. Let's keep going.
Okay, sorry.
moving.
3 honkies, El Guapo, and 2 really cool brothers. And though rarely together, all of us in one town, when we are together, shit will go down. Any others may come, we take in new strays, but my brother, these boys, we are here to stay. But I'm off topic, my rhymes are all spent. This poem's meant to focus on hot chocolate. Luckily, his real name flows and fits in that, his 3 names. But it's hard to focus on one of us 6, but this one is leaving for... We'll miss you, my brother, you're leaving, it blows. So start checking the strip joints so we're in the know. So don't forget us and remember, we're better as 7. I know it sounds like bullshit getting deeper, but we truly are our brother's keeper.
Oh, nice. Not very much.
Very
That's
nice.
Yeah.
So going back to that story, I have a question for you guys. The story before the poem.
Oh, sure.
Yes.
Have you ever accidentally sent a text message to the wrong person and been mortified of what they were going to say or respond to?
I will. I'll go last. I have a couple.
I don't know if I have.
All right.
I don't know if I have. I'm usually pretty
David?
careful.
Yeah, so this is fairly recent too, which sucks. So my wife and I occasionally send each other, I wouldn't call them, they're love notes, essentially, just really like
Would we
lovey-dovey
call them
things.
dick pics?
Oh, why?
No, we would not. We would not.
Just checking.
David, if you
Simple-
ever ask that question, the
simple
answer is
no's
always
fine.
no. I never want to know that.
Actually, the dick pics I send are just a picture of Mike.
We've all got those. We've all got those.
I'd like to know what are your fees for cutting out boomerang guns? Because
So anyways, throughout the day when we both work from the house now, so we're not texting each other. We see each other all day long. But when we were both working in offices, we would send each other little love notes. And one time I sent something to the effect of, I love you so much. You're my favorite person. Kiss, kiss, like heart, heart, whatever. Right. And then I hit send. About 30 seconds later, I get a text back from my boss saying, "Oh man, that's the sweetest thing I've ever heard." I'm like, oh no. He happened to be the last person that I had texted before I was going to text my wife. So, but we still to this day get a really good laugh out of it because of that.
well, while you're thinking hot chocolate, I'm going to tell a couple. So first one I'm going to tell is actually El Guapo's. He was at work with Instant Messenger, and him and a coworker were talking about the weekend, how things were and stuff. And she talked about some things she made. So he was like, "Oh, I didn't know that you did that." So he's like, he meant to say, "Do you cook? Like, do you cook a lot?"
Wow.
He wrote, "Do you cook?" Instead, he accidentally typed, "Do you cock?" And then the best part about it is, he said he closed the window as if that made it all go away. He panicked. He closed the window and then he immediately called her and he was like, I'm so sorry, it was a typo, blah, blah, blah. So that was his. So now I'll tell you one that was intentional. My wife did it. She thought it was hilarious. I'm pretty good friends with my boss. I was friends with him before I got to my job, but he is still my boss, right? I always know that he's still my boss. We had our Christmas party one year, our holiday party one year. And the next day, my wife and I are in the car, and she takes my phone, doesn't tell me. She texts my boss and says something to the effect of, oh, yesterday's party was crazy. After the party, I went to my girlfriend's house. So she sends it to him. She tells me then, and I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, it's funny, right? Like, if I say that to him, I'm like, there's no good situation here. I'm like, first of all, so I immediately respond to him. I'm like, believe it or not, that was actually my wife trying to be funny. I'm like, sorry about that. So I told her, I'm like, there's no good situation here. I'm like, here's what could happen. I go, one, he'd be like, oh, what a fucking dirtbag. He has a girlfriend and he doesn't mind just sharing it with anybody. I'm like, two, or worse, he responds back, yeah, I went to my girlfriend's house too yesterday. I'm like, I don't want to know that. He's my boss.
Or worse, he responds, which one?
Oh my God. Or start saying some names. He's like, yeah, no. So the other one, now that I did, and I know I told you a couple minutes in, the balls were going to show up, but it's showing up now. It wasn't a photo. I am texting. I don't think we had both kids. We might have both kids at the time. We used to always use somebody from their daycare as their babysitters, right? Perfect. They already know the kids. Kids are already comfortable with them. And we know they've gone at least through some background checks for the place. So we used to use this one girl forever. She ended up moving. So we asked another girl there, hey, are you interested in babysitting on the weekends at night when we go out? Absolutely. Gives me a number. I give her my number. I said, all right, I'll text you the information. So Saturday afternoon, I'm texting my cousin Yanni, and I'm also texting her. So it's my fault. I'm texting both of them.
We always knew it was your fault.
Both of them respond back to something I said with perfect. He was responding to whatever I said about the weekend. She was responding to that time works for me. It's perfect. I responded back to him, I thought, just like my balls. Oh. So I send it, and now immediately I realize, oh, fuck, it's the wrong person. So I send another message to her, and I'm like, I am so sorry. I was in the middle of texting somebody else. I was goofing around with them. I didn't mean to send that to you. So now I'm also like, now I got to tell my wife, because I'm like, what about if this person's like, I don't want to fight you. People are sending talking about his balls.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I send my wife a message, and I'm like, funny story. And I clipped the message that I exchanged with her, and I'm like, this is what happened. So she calls me up, and it's funny. She wasn't as mad at me, like not paying attention and talking about my balls. She was like, if we lose this fucking babysitter, we can't go out. She's like, because you're a fucking idiot and you don't know who you're typing. She's like, I'm going to be pissed. So then when the lady came over that night, and look, I don't get embarrassed. I really don't. Very, very rarely. I was so fucking embarrassed when she came over. I'm like, I gotta apologize again. I'm so sorry. And she's like, don't worry. She's like, it's fine. It happens. Like, I'm like, oh, thank God. And then we used her for a couple of years before she moved away.
All right, well, if she was a avid listener of the podcast, she would know that you like to talk about your balls, so it wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever done that, because I try to be pretty careful. No. I think I've done the usual. I've probably said I love you to, like, completely wrong person. And I've always gotten back the, well, I love you too. And I'm like, okay, I'm sorry.
But yeah.
But, like, I haven't done anything. I don't think I've done anything really crazy.
That's at least neutral enough, right? Like,
right.
That kind of thing. It's when you say something else or say something like, oh, man, this went off the rails type thing. All right. So, Hot Chocolate, is there anything else that you have on your mind that you want to get off your chest before we say goodbye?
I believe I've already mentioned this to you, but I am one of the psychos that listen to your podcast at twice the speed. I don't regret it at all. It helps.
You're broken.
Go up. Yeah, but for so many reasons, not just this one.
So having said that, your name has come up a few times on the show, and
yes,
not always in the best light. How do you feel about that?
I really appreciate that you thought that there was one story that you told where I look good. That's not the case. I've listened to the podcast. You guys are assholes.
We had to say that to get you on. We couldn't tell you the truth.
Oh my gosh! I'm like, are you serious? The one that I don't understand is how could you tell the entire world that you need to take off every article of clothing to poop?
Well, let's be realistic. The entire world is all of like 200 people.
I still remember where we were. I remember exactly where we were when I found that
standing next to me in the bathroom.
No, that's not where we were. Horrible. Don't tell that story. We were in Vegas again. We were in Vegas, and you're like, I gotta use the restroom. And my response was, dude, we're in a casino. These are the cleanest places in the world. Go use the bathroom. And out of nowhere, you go, I gotta take off all my clothes with that poop. And I remember David and I were just like, what the hell are you talking about?
The worst is some of those Vegas hotel rooms, the actual toilet area, if it's in a separate room, is so fucking small that like I can't keep my clothes in there. So you remember, I'd have to close the main bathroom door and be like, I need to leave my clothes outside the bathroom so you guys can't come in here because then I'll be walking around with my dick out.
Oh, well, another part of that story that I've never thought about. That is.
So how do you feel about David talking about your alcohol choice when we went to see that guy with his compound, as David calls it?
Oh, what's the right response for that? David, I hate you and I hope you die.
With that, I'm Michael Carter.
And I'm David Michael.
And we are ridiculously bored.